Good evening. I'd like to call the March 3rd, 2020 Select Board meeting to order. Our first thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first thing we're going to do is go into executive session.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to motion that the Select Board enter an executive session for the purposes of approving prior meeting minutes under Chapter 30A, Paragraph 21, Section A.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to enter into executive session for meeting minutes. By roll call.
Carlson, aye.
Thomas, aye.
DeFazio, aye.
To discuss these matters in open session will compromise the town's position and needs to be discussed in executive session. We will come back after executive session to continue the rest of our meeting. Thank you. Thanks, Billy. Welcome back to the Select Board meeting, March 3rd. We are back in executive session. I will continue with the announcements. Apple Tree Arts has 2 events coming up. Celebrate All Things Irish is on Saturday, March 7th at 7 p.m. Enjoy an evening of festive Celtic music. This will be held at the Great Hall, and tickets can be purchased at the door. Welcome to Bourbon Street is the theme of this year's Apple Tree Arts annual Great Hall Gala. It will be held March 14th with general admission at 7 p.m. and VIP admission at 6 p.m. Tickets can be purchased online at www.appletreearts.org. The spring and summer recreation program registration is open. Please visit the town website, www.grafton-ma.gov, for program details and online registration. It is just after 7 o'clock. There's still 1 more hour of voting, so if you're at home and you forgot to go vote today, you still have an hour. Next, public comments. Do we have any public comments? Okay. Come on up, Ray. Ray, if you can just give your name and your address before you speak.
So my name is Ray Lawhan. I live on 61 Estabrook Street in Grafton. And so my what I have to say today is that the quality of Estabrook has been bad for a very long time. I've lived in Grafton for 12 years. And a recent incident between my little brother and in the garbage truck when he was riding the bus is really what is driving why I'm here today. And so what happened was his bus and a garbage truck had to pass each other on the road. And there's not enough space, number one, on the road. And the shoulders of the road are so deteriorated, and there are so many potholes on this road that you have to push over every time you want to pass someone. And so the garbage truck and the bus are passing each other, and there's not enough space for both of them. And the bus ends up falling into the ditch on the side of the road with all of the kids on the bus. And so the bus cannot get out of this ditch, so they have to call in a new bus for all the kids to get on and to finish the bus route. And so I went down the road the other day, and I counted, and there are 209 potholes on the road. And the other issue is that my brother is now, his bus route has been moved, so he is now dropped off at the end of the road because the bus people have decided that the road is too dangerous for the bus to drive on. But the issue is that my brother is walking home from his bus stop, and some of the corners around the road are so you can't see around him that he has to cut through the neighbor's house so that he doesn't have to go around that corner. And I don't really know how else I can bring it to everyone's attention besides coming here and talking about the road.
Thank you.
No problem. And so my parents typed up this letter about a month and a half ago, but they were nervous to present it because they do not want a filter on the road where it's only local traffic, because there's a farmer on my road, Paul Knowlton, and he has dump trucks that come down the road every day dumping dirt. And I don't know what he's really doing, but he's clearing out some area. I don't know what he's doing, but we don't want to cause issues for him that now he can't have his trucks coming up and down the road to move the dirt. And so I don't really know what I want as a solution, because a lot of the solutions, like the pros and cons, aren't very good. You know, you widen the road and you repave it, and now people are flying down it, and people go fast down that road anyway. Personally, I drive a 2003 Acura. I just finally got it going, 17 years old, and I got to take it easy on it. So I don't go over the road past 25, 30 miles an hour because the road's so narrow, and there's parts of the road where the potholes are so bad that I'm seriously going 5 miles an hour over them, because it damages the car if I go over 5 miles an hour.
Ray, do you feel like that speed is an issue on that road in general?
I think that speed is an issue on that road for a couple of reasons. One, I think speed's an issue because of the quality of the road. I think the other issue with the speed is that it's almost like it's a great road to cut through, and people just will fly down it. So I know that my neighbor, Mr. Goodspeed, has stopped people and told them to slow down because they're going too fast down the road. But that's where I'm torn, is I don't know if repaving the road to help my brother and the buses and cars is good, or if you repave it and now people are going even faster down the road.
Good question.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you for coming in and sharing that information with us. I too am aware of Estabrook Road and its deficiencies. When I was even your age, it was the same condition, but I'm sure it's gotten worse with the shoulders eroding due to water runoff. Have you been to the Traffic Safety Committee here in Grafton, and have you been to the DPW Advisory Committee meetings at all, and have given them and shared this information with them?
So I know my mom was in contact with them because she started this process like a month and a half ago, and she went to I don't know the official people that she went to, but a road committee.
Yes.
And they pretty much told her that it would be too expensive for the road to be repaved and widened, and that they have no intention of fixing the road.
Well, hopefully we'll fix the potholes, right?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is it's narrow, there's 50 or so trees on the road, the retaining walls, ledge, popping through, causing a lot of the 290 you mentioned. It's just it's a horrible road, and it will be very, very expensive if it's something that we want to take on. You would point the DPW advisory, if that's a road you think you should do as it relates to every other competing road. You can certainly
Did they give you
move it on the list.
Did they give you an estimate of how much it was going to cost before they said it was too expensive?
No, we'll do something.
I want to say that my mom said somewhere around $3 million to fix the road, but that is me trying to remember number.
No worries. I appreciate it.
And I have some pictures on my phone if you guys want to because I know I was emailing you guys.
Yeah.
If you would like to see those pictures, I can
Forward them to us.
forward them.
That'd
Please.
be great.
That'd be great, Ray.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
To my knowledge, Estabrook's been on the list for a long, long time. I remember complaints years and years ago, so it's not one of the ones that's on our list of roads to address?
Not on the short list, no. Just because of the traffic and the return on investment is just not, from a math standpoint, certainly from an emotional standpoint, when people live there, it's a big deal. But from that, the study we did in 14 relative to all the roads, I don't even know what year it fell in.
Can we find out?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the report, I just don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think what I would like to gain in the goal of me really coming is so that the road can be in the best shape so that the bus can drive down it, so that my brother can get dropped off at the house. Because I think that right now, him getting dropped off at the end of the road instead of the house is more dangerous for him than the bus driving down the road itself.
Okay.
And I think that's the biggest issue, because he has told me, I talked to him today about it, and I was thinking about bringing him, but he wasn't feeling well. what I was talking to him today about was that many times, even when he's walking home and there are large trucks driving down the road, he still has to stop walking and he has to get off of the road itself onto like the dirt pothole shoulder area and wait for the car to pass. And what he said today is that it's only a matter of time where someone is going too fast and doesn't move out of the way, where he's going to have to fall into the ditch himself.
So can we coordinate with the school department and see if there's something they can do about the busing, Tim?
Yeah, we reached out to Jay and we got the email, and I know he's talked to your mom a couple times. So I'm with Brian and Paul to try to figure out what the best solution is short term, to see if there's something we can do to make safe passage. The potholes are bad, but the travel width is the problem until you make it wider. And you can't because of the shoulder dropping off into the Knowlton farmland.
But the problem, I guess, originated because the dump truck and a bus were trying to pass at the same time.
Correct.
I mean, can we instruct the bus to stop in whatever coming, or I mean, just posting some signs like narrow road, move over, or something? I don't know.
There's really, you gotta kind of, at different points, it's wider or narrower as you go. So depending on where you put them. I mean, it's a one-time, the incident happened once. And it was just random from the trash truck to be there at that time. We try to coordinate with A.L. Harvey in terms of picking the time, but for them, they're picking up trash on a route starting at 7 a.m. When they get there, they get there. And if it's a half day and that's when the bus is there and they're there, there's no way for them to know someone's at the other end when they start up from Adams Road. So we can sign it as long as we have land in which to put the signs. I certainly don't want to post them on trees.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can we put this as a future agenda
Yeah,
item to discuss? I think that, I'd like some time to do a little more research, and if you can send the pictures along, that would
Absolutely.
be great. We could talk to school committee, get an answer from Jay on his opinion on how to move forward with this. Because typically, public comments, we listen to comments, but we haven't really had a chance to help find a solution yet, so.
And I think that posting signs saying narrow road are an excellent idea, but there are parts of that road where I have no idea what a garbage truck and a bus would do because it is so narrow, and the way that the dirt and the walls, trees come down on the side of the road, I'm not sure if there would be space for a bus and a garbage truck to pass. I think at that point on the road where the bus did fall in the ditch, I think it was almost lucky because there are parts of that road where the bus would have to go in reverse until it could find a spot to get out of the way because there's just not enough space. So thank you guys for listening.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming in.
And so this is the letter that my parents
Oh,
wrote.
perfect. Thank you. All right, next we have, Tom Scanlon is here for our audit report. Come on up. Oh, I'm sorry, were there any other public comments? I didn't see any arms wave, okay, thank you. Come on up. I just wanted to make sure I didn't cut anybody else off.
Oh, that's a tough act to follow. I'm not too sure I could do that at that age.
Oh, yeah, great.
So you're gonna cover this book first?
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah.
Just one and pass down if you would.
Thanks.
Can't believe it's been a year.
What's that?
It's been a year.
I know, it's been a year. Goes by fast. So I'm gonna go over the audit with you. First one books, the financial statements. Just as a general note, just what we do, what an audit is. We did a financial audit, which is opining on your financial statements. That's the number one objective to do it. We assess risk on your financial statements. We kind of look for. We spend a lot of our time in the treasurer's office and the collector's office. Feel your cash recs and your accounts receivable recs are your number one, your significant accounts. So we spend a lot of time in that area. I kind of want to walk through just the financials with you. On pages 3 and 4. This is the audited opinion. It's a clean opinion. So in your bond, when you go out to the bond market, they're going to be looking at this. It's going to be good for you. When the granting agencies look at you, this is what they're looking at, and again, it's a clean opinion. And then if you get into your financial statements, they really start on pages 15 and 16. And governmental financial statements are very unique. There's actually two balance sheets within a municipality compared to like a company. You have one balance sheet, one P&L. These on pages 15 and 16, these are called your entity-wide financial statements. It's full accrual. You'll see fixed assets on there. All your liabilities, your debt, your leases, your compensated absences, which is when someone leaves employment, it's about sick buyback you give them. As you look at some things to take out of here, the two kind of things that jump out of you is if you stay in the first column, that's your governmental activities. You see all the way down the bottom, unrestricted net position. You'll see it in a bracket of 71 million. You never should see net position in a negative. The two drivers of that is the net pension liability and the net OPEB liability, which I know we've talked in the past about OPEB. Again, your OPEB liability is 61 million. Again, it's really long-term thinking. OPEB, I adopted a trust. I think you have 125,000 in your trust at June 30th. OPEB is all about in the future thinking, how it relates to you, but you should be in your mindset when you're setting current budgets. It's really somewhere there is a true cost. It's a promise you made to an employee that at some point in time when they retire, you're going to pay a portion of their health insurance. So it should be in your thinking when you're setting your budgets. Now, I wouldn't take free cash or stabilization fund, the majority, and put it into your stabilization fund, but you're taking a hard reserve and putting it into a restricted reserve. Really, if you're going to fund the trust, it would really be out of your tax rate or some kind of revenue source that you're not using. I know we've talked about that in the past, too.
Using it all.
Yeah, I don't think we have any revenue sources that we're not using.
So these are your NDY. I think these are more fun for accountants than they are actually useful to management. And on pages 17 and 18, these are kind of your standard financial statements. They're on the modified accrual. You'll see your accounts receivable, your property taxes, your tax liens, and your excise taxes. So what we do in the audit, so we get this balance sheet, we'll assess risk. Again, you see the cash equivalents. We'll spend a lot of time in your bank recs. So we'll ensure that your cash is being reconciled, and those are the controls we test. And once we assess your controls they're okay, they're adequate over the cash, and then we look at your receivables. So we spend a lot of time in the collector's office. We'll make sure the detail on the balance sheet equals detailed taxpayers, and we'll do a couple walkthroughs into the accounts. So we spend a lot of time on the top half of your balance sheet here, which then it comes down to geography, right? You do a lot of analytical, compare last year's to this year's budget to actual, and it kind of makes sure everything's in the right bucket now. If something is a grant, you want it in non-major funds. You don't want it sitting in general fund to inflate your free cash. So we'll look we'll do a lot of testing on your revenues to make sure your general fund revenues are your general fund revenues, no grants in there. We'll make sure your grant revenues are in your non-major funds. So we spent a lot of time in this area on here. So I think it's important because this is where you're making your decisions from. Again, you're getting your free cash, one of your key numbers, right? You look forward to getting it, and how you're utilizing it. And this is representative on here. So if we look in the general fund under unassigned, the 6.4 million, it's a positive number, which is good. Everything on here you'd want to see positive, not negatives. So the 6.4, what that made up of, it should be your free cash number, which is 1.9 million. It should be your overlay number, which is approximately about 600,000, and it should include your stabilization funds, which is about 3.8 million. So those numbers are all key to you in addressing your budgets, and they're representative of your financial statements. That's sort of what the audit process is validating your assertions that management has made, that they're complete and accurate, and we're verifying that. So that's really what a financial statement audit is. I know there's usually an expectation gap between audit, its sole purpose is to find fraud. No, it's not a sole purpose. It's more of a forensic audit, per se. But again, if you had material misstatement on there due to fraud, an audit would catch it because you're doing the testing. So you're reasonably assured your financial statements are presented fairly, and that's the sole goal of an audit. So I think, really, if I was management looking at it, assuring that your free cash and your stabilization funds are properly represented, and this will tell you that. And then I always encourage to look at the non-major governmental funds, the breakdown. That's way out back is on pages 71 through 73. I always encourage management to look at that. Those are your grants, your revolving funds. I always like to have management look at those. You might see something that has maybe an obsolete account or a grant you want more interest in. So I always encourage to look at that. On page 18 is kind of your statement of revenues and expenditures, and this is really what your bond rating companies are looking at, and DOR. On your first column, on your general fund, you'll see your net change in fund balance is $261,000. So it's telling you you're kind of breaking even on your year, taking in what you're spending. And bond rating companies will pay attention to that. They want to see that decreasing, which I know you've got questions in the past, which is you had positive results in fiscal year 19.
But aren't we always taking in what we're spending?
What's that?
We're always taking in what we're spending every year.
Not necessarily. If you use more free cash, so it's really using fund balance. So if you're using for a large project, you take like a couple years ago, I think it took over $1 million to fund a capital project. That's the year you saw a decrease in your fund balance.
So if we took $1 million out of free cash and used that for operating expenses, for instance, bond rating companies would take a look at that and be like, that's a red flag.
Yes, because you would
Okay.
see a decrease here
Okay.
because you're using fund balance. Now, if you didn't have to replace that $1 million, which is telling me you do, because if you're
Right.
spending it, you're getting it back.
So this is the reason why I asked this question is
Yep.
because a couple of years ago, we had a discussion around here about whether or not we were running a structural deficit, and I think my argument was we are. And the deal is, we had an override a few years back that increased our levy capacity.
Correct.
And we've run through that levy capacity now, and if we don't do something about it, then we're at the point where you're talking about where we would have to dip into free cash to pay operating expenses or reduce the operating expenses.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yes. And, so next financial statement I kind of want to walk through page 21. And this is probably the most important financial statement as far as management goes. This is your budget versus actual. This is going to kind of reflect right back to, you see the increase. So you see the first column is the amount you carry forward, which is your encumbrances. So it's the budget items that you obligated at the end of 18 and you're carrying forward into 19. Next column is original budget. That's your original budget you went to town meeting with. And your final budget is after all your special town meetings, after your reserve fund transfers. And then you have your actual revenues, actual expenses. And the column all the way out is how you fared to your budget. You can see the top half, your revenues, you're about 398,000 to the surplus. That's under 1%. I'd like to see a little bit more conservative, but that's an auditor in me speaking. So you're not really generating a lot of your free cash on the revenue side, and you can see on the expenditure side, you're generating about 764. So your total in fiscal year 19 budget generated free cash of 1.1. And if you go over to down below, it says how you funded your budget, which goes to your point. You do have a structural deficit budget because you're funding fund balance with it, and that's the 1.4, and plus encumbrances, which is a component of fund balance. So you can see you used 1.4, and you only generated 1.1.
Right.
So you should see an overall decrease in fund balance just looking at that. But you used free cash to put into your stabilization fund, which is a component of fund balance. Then you got some accruals in there from GAAP accruals. So you've always had good, sound financial policy over your free cash. You've never taken it, majority of it, and put it into operations. You've always used it for one time.
Right.
So your policies are working. You're using it and you're generating it.
Right.
You just don't want to not generate it and use it because eventually you're going to be in a structural deficit.
Right. That's a real problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's okay to have a structural deficit, which you do, all towns do, because they're using fund balance, right?
Right.
But your financial policies and your management has always been there kind of guiding it, which you've used free cash well over the past few years.
Okay.
So that's kind of on the financial statements, just as a general, like overtone to the audit. I think you're very well managed. I think you're very responsive to items that come up. You're constantly addressing your financial statements. You're using your financial statements, reading them. And again, your financial policies have worked. And one other thing I do want to point out is, I know we've always talked about it, is your reserves, your free cash and your stabilization funds are your main reserves, which they're about 5.7 million. Your budget's about 59 million. We highly recommend you being around the 10% mark. You've always floated around the 10-11% mark. I know the bond rating companies have a little different formula where they take your assigned and unassigned and compare it to your budget. And you're at 14%. Their magic number is to get over the 15% mark, which I know we've talked about. So you're right on the borderline with your reserves. So one thing I probably would recommend is probably start looking to build those up in the future. I know you don't have a lot of levy capacity, and you do have the road stabilization override, which is a good thing, and they do have the debt exclusions. So overall, I think you're a very well managed town. I know we have about 85 clients, and I can probably bring it to a few of them that are not. So I have a good comparison of what I see out there. So I know if I was sitting on the board, I'd probably want to hear that, because I mean, I don't know how many years ago it was that probably the report wasn't so good.
Right.
I don't really care to go back there. So. The second report, is there any questions on the financials?
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Oh, did you want to go? On the, when you're picking audit, and you're going through and you're doing the reconciliation, okay, do you have any criteria sampling that you look for, or are you doing everything? Can you give it a little bit more, just help me understand a little bit more what your audit process is, and just, you don't have to go into all specifics, just want to get a sample of it.
Yeah, so what we do is assess risk. Like I said, your cash and your receivables are your two biggest things. So we won't use sampling when it comes to cash. We'll look at all your bank statements and dive into your bank recs and look at your outstanding checks, make sure the cutoff is there. So there's been significant time at the bank statement level, looking for reconciling items, timing, making sure deposits are getting and doing walkthroughs. Same thing on the receivable side, except we'll pull a sample haphazardly of customers' accounts by 25 to 50 and walk them through the system to make sure they're being paid, the stamps, your controls. So someone comes to the window, they get a receipt, stamp paid, it's an initial, it's cash or check. So we'll walk through whole one of those to assess your controls. The sampling is more on the expenditure end. So we'll pull about 50 expenditures across, I think you probably week 26 warrants, we'll pull about 50 of them. And we'll look through to make sure your controls, your purchase orders, your initials, make sure they're hitting the right accounts. And same thing on the payroll. We'll pull about 25 to 30 payroll, making sure, same sort of thing, make sure compliance testing are in there. And then there's individual work papers like Chapter 90 we will always assess as high risk amongst all our municipalities because it's a reimbursable type program. So we'll look at 100% of expenditures in Chapter 90. Because we just, and then we'll look at your balance sheet and look for deficit accounts, and then we'll dive more deeper into those.
So like snow and ice, for example.
Snow and ice, we'll dive into.
Any other deficit accounts that you look into?
Like usually on the grant end, like none jump out at me. I don't think you had a lot of them. And one good thing I would always encourage is when the free cash certified, always look at that as management, and on there they will identify deficit accounts because they will penalize you for them.
Okay.
So I think you only had.
We had 2 last year.
Yeah, and I think one was a variance with your tax title, so it wasn't a true deficit. I think you had one small one, very small. So
I think
traditionally,
one for the schools, snow and ice, and then there was one other, reconciliation for police details was one.
yeah. So traditionally, GRAP doesn't have a lot of deficit accounts, but those are the type of. So we'll pull a sample of about 50 expenditures. That's just our sampling. We're testing our controls to make sure you have them, and then we're looking at individual accounts. Like when you get to the single audit here, we tested SPED grants, so we'll look at expenditures within that grant.
Great.
So I think we're covering a lot of, and we do a lot of analytical last year to this year when we take off. Like we do an analysis of your special revenue funds, which is all your grants, and we'll do analytical on that. So if we see, I don't know, if athletic revolving jumped up or it's jumped down, we'll dive deeper into there. So a lot of our tests are off of our analytical procedures.
Great. Great, thank you.
Does that answer the question?
It does, yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. When
Yeah.
you hear audit, you know, some people think, oh my God, is it like an IRS audit or something like that? But I think that was a great explanation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions from the
So we're
board?
gonna start with this, go to this one next.
Yeah. I plan on being brief on these.
It's the independent audit.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that drive the requirements of getting an audit. One is any bond covenants, you know, the bond market, if you're in the bond market, you have to be audited, they're gonna require you to. And the other requirement is the single audit, which is this document here, and that is if a municipality expends over $750,000 in federal awards, you have to be audited, and then this is a separate report just on federal awards. So the town of Grafton receives about 1.3 million in federal awards. Majority's at the school department. You have to test at least 40% of the expenditures of certain grants. It was the SPED cluster, and that's what we did all our testing on. And your grant management at the school level is good. So there was no findings in regard to the single audit. And then the last one is the management letter.
You can have this one too, yes.
I think it's kind of a representative of what I said earlier about the management, how responsive they are and how they take things serious. Is a couple. So what management letters are is it's kind of I give you comments and findings of operations that I see as in testing internal controls. One thing you don't want to see in here is anything classified as a material weakness or significant deficiency, which I think they kind of speak for themselves. An example of that would be if you're not balancing your cash, or if you're behind 45 days in your cash, you would see it in here as a significant deficiency. If you're not balancing your receivables, you're not tracking your budget properly in your financial statements, you're not setting it up. There's recap errors. You would see those in here, and they would be identified through those two material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. You don't have these. There are other matters, and there really matters to where probably auditors being auditors. So the first one is GASB statements to keep your clean opinion. There's future GASBs coming out. Really to stay on top of them. There's two ones, leases and fiduciary funds. I think a lot of people don't sleep at night in Washington. They think things up just to make financial statements more complicated. They have some complices in here, but the fiduciary funds, there's a lot of things you're gonna have to do a little bit differently, classify things. Like, for instance, right now your student activities are classified as an agency fund. It's just a matter of them going to be switched over to a non-major fund. Probably has no bearing on yourselves. It's more going to fall onto Anita, but just more work for her to do. That's all. I just want to keep you abreast of them, so that people are doing things behind the scenes you probably don't appreciate, like these things, like trying to classify these things to get your clean opinion. It's not exciting stuff. It's more, I guess for accountants it's exciting, but just wanted to let you know that there's new standards coming out. And then the other two areas was police off duty detail. We thought you could improve your procedures with reconciling of that detail account and the receivable, which since we've been here in field work, which was October, November, you've implemented some procedures to rectify that situation. And those are kind of the only two comments that we found.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
I do. Thank you for issuing the report. I just have one
Yeah.
criticism
Yeah.
on the report. It's not the technical information. It's just you don't define GASB anywhere in this document. And I'm a first-time reader of this, first-time select board member. I know what GASB is.
Yeah.
But to anyone else in the general public who stays up at night, who's a nerd like me and reads this for the first time, I would just ask if you could, any place that you've got an acronym, don't assume that
Yeah.
we all know what that exactly means. That's my only thing. Other than that, first time looking at this, it's pretty concise, but thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And like I said, if you got any issues throughout the year, don't hesitate to reach out. If there's certain areas that concern you, please don't hesitate to reach out, because that will help us do our audit better, help us define more things, get into areas where, so.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just one question. The
Yeah.
finance director position, effectively speaking, how do you see that? You made a recommendation that we look into adopting the finance director position here at the end.
Yeah, it's been in there, I think 3 years now.
How would that help?
What's that?
How would that help us?
Probably to centralize all the information into one area, financially wise. Municipal finance is very complex. You have a lot of complex things going on. For instance, CPA, just filling out the tax recap. Things are constantly changing. There's a new Modernization Act 2 coming out. It'd just be one central place, one position. You're right on the borderline of size-wise. You're kind of teetering in that, look around the other communities in that size range, have a finance director position. It also, I feel like it has conformity, like if people are leaving, you have more people coming in with the finance director, so it protects against risk more than, would you see the immediate effects? No, but over long term, people coming and transitioning in and out, I think you see consistency with that.
Okay. And what's the tipping point for size in the communities you generally see?
Right about your size.
20,000 or so?
Yeah, it's more on the budget end of it. It's more a $60 million budget.
I see.
Yeah, you're right in that area.
Okay.
That's why I've been recommending it. There's more for probably exposure to risk of turnover of personnel.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Donna, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Can you just expand a little bit about your recommendation about the CPA?
Yeah. So the CPA, that's kind of more of an accounting end of it. It's between the sub ledger and the general ledger. So you have accounting wise, you have your general ledger, then you have your sub ledger. The sub ledger just wasn't tying out to the control part. The bottom line was fine.
Okay.
But the integrity of the line items in between the general ledger, really between reserve for encumbrances and reserve accounts.
Right.
So if you were looking at the sub ledger of what the spend for the CPA, you probably wouldn't see a difference.
Okay.
It's the control part of the ledger that gets submitted to DOR.
Mitigating that?
What's that?
We're mitigating that?
Yes.
Any other questions? Comments? Thank you so much. Thanks for
problem.
coming in.
Yeah. These lights are a lot hotter than you think they are.
Yeah.
We know.
Just try walking outside after a meeting and you can't see a thing outside when it's dark.
Whoa.
Just wondering if I could just elaborate on one point why Tom's here relative to the details and reconciliation. There's a lot of timing issues. There's projects for Chapter 90 reimbursement. They're timing issues more than anything else. There are a couple people that have details that don't pay, like Verizon. We have to send them nasty letters. So we have protocols to collect those monies. But that's where it lies. But there are points where, we get close to year end, we realize, we need to collect $27,000, and that's when the chief and I start making these phone calls to get those
Right.
people to pay, because we paid the police. Now we need to be reimbursed from the companies that have detail work.
To that point, if I may, Tim, would the inverse of that, like when we receive that grant for the diesel emissions settlement, would that be something else that also, like to your point, does it kind of muck with the controls a little bit, because that was really unforeseen income that the town received midway through the fiscal year?
I don't think it's gonna be, the controls are we're gonna still follow the procedure in which to spend that 189. But it's not in terms of collecting, it's gonna go into a grant account, so it's not gonna affect the general fund.
Yeah, correct. You have controls in place. Then when a receipt comes in, you identify it.
Okay.
It's non-general fund. They find the department. They sign before an account even gets set up. I need to get the grant award letter, and that's how the account's set up. So that's your control in place, that nothing ends up in the general fund. But you have sound controls over, and it starts with the Treasury Department receiving it.
Great, thank you.
I just figured it would be good for clarification. People don't think we're not collecting the money from
It-
Verizon or National Grid.
And police off duty is such a tough time of year because you're doing your road work in the summertime, and that ends up being your end of your fiscal year. So towns are always in there, that dilemma of timing, because you're paying out in June when the work's due, and they're coming in July and August. So if it was December, it'd probably be no problem.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right, next we have, I know we have members of the Health Alliance here, and I see Josh is here. If you wanna come on up, that would be great. You can sit or however, whatever you're most comfortable. Thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it.
These lights are horrible.
Josh is comfortable back there?
My name is Pat Bruckman. I am the Chief Public Health Nurse for the Alliance. I apologize, Alyssa Reddy, who is the Health and Medical Coordinating Coalition Chair, Chief was supposed to be here with me today, but she got in an accident on the way. So she was not able to join us. So I will give you an update from the clinical view, and then you can feel free to ask questions, okay?
Sure.
As you know, the Alliance is monitoring the situation with the novel coronavirus, both globally, nationally, here locally in Massachusetts, and within the Alliance towns. The coronavirus, of course, first presented itself in Wuhan City, Hubei Province, China. It has since spread both within China and globally, including here in the United States. There are currently 12 states here in the United States that are reporting cases. The Massachusetts Public Health Lab is now doing testing that is going to be confirmed by the CDC. The situation in Massachusetts, the risk to Massachusetts residents remains low. We have one confirmed case and one presumptive positive case in Massachusetts. Now, just so that you're aware, any case that is tested at the state lab until it is confirmed by the CDC will be considered a presumptive positive case. So just so you keep those terms separate. And you'll see on the CDC website that they're reporting confirmed cases, presumptive positive cases, contact, person-to-person case spread. And the CDC website is getting updated every day, and sometimes more often than that. I would say, as far as the Alliance goes, people should be more concerned with flu. There's more flu circulating right now than there, coronavirus. I mean, we did only have those 2 cases in Mass. That being said, I do understand people's concern. It is a novel virus. There is no treatment for it. It's all symptomatic treatment and whatever. It seems right now that the greatest risk to people who are older and those with other medical conditions or immunocompromising medical conditions. That being said, we are monitoring the situation across the board. We are also receiving reports of travelers that are coming in through the 11 quarantine stations in the United States, and we are monitoring them for the 14 days, including, temperatures twice a day and monitoring them for symptoms. Currently, you do not have any travelers in your town. If you were to have travelers in your town, what we do is we notify the town manager and the Board of Health. We do not give out any names or addresses. We just notify you that there is a traveler in the town that we are monitoring. As far as fielding calls, feel free. If somebody calls your Board of Health office and speaks with Nancy, most certainly she can call me. I'd rather calls get directed toward me. If people have questions or concerns, I can answer them on a, person-to-person basis and, direct them to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. We at the local level most certainly cannot make a decision as to whether or not to test a person who is, has traveled and is showing symptoms. We would bump that up to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And this is a very fluid, very evolving situation. Most certainly what I was telling people 3 weeks ago is very different than what I'm telling them now, only because there's updated guidance from the CDC. I'd be more than happy to answer any direct questions that you have.
Does anybody have any questions?
No.
No? Anybody in the audience have any questions? Great. Thank you for the update.
Yes.
You're welcome.
I just want to cover 5 quick things, and Josh is here from the Board of Health, so I just want to make it clear to the community, the Health Alliance, we have a big meeting on Monday.
Correct.
Talk about, a strategy. If the state gives us instruction to do something, we stand ready to do that, obviously, but the instruction has to come first, or whatever that is. So all the communities in the Health Alliance will be in
Meeting
Shrewsbury
Monday
for
in Shrewsbury
Monday.
at the library.
Internally to this building and our operations, we're taking steps with, some are extreme in terms of hand sanitizer, which we have on the walls. We will buy kind of remote units that brief the doorways, if you will, as people come in and as they leave. If we do feel that someone's sick with anything, if we overreact, or if a staff is thinking that, this guy just coughed all over my counter, we will have protocols in place to do doorknobs and to do countertops, just to protect the next person that comes to the counter and the staff who works here. So it may be belts and suspenders, but we are taking those protocols seriously.
Right.
So we're going through that. An odd thing, the Museum of Science is actually doing a thing with GBH, NPR on the 8th, so people can go. It's a free event to talk with public health professionals at the state and in the city of Boston, so people wanted to go to that.
Right. And
Superintendent today put out a good email to the parents in Grafton relative to the virus, so I thought that was good and helpful, and not alarming, but just telling people, do the basics, take care of your health, take care of your family, wash your hands, don't touch your nose and eyes, and cover your mouth when you cough, the basic stuff. I know it's very simple, and it's not better than me,
Same
but
thing you would do for the flu.
yes. And then, finally, the emergency dispensing site, we had a mock drill in January. We would do, if get called upon, we're ready, and we stand ready to do whatever they tell us to do. Obviously, without a vaccine, it's tough to administer a vaccine if you don't have it, but we're ready to do that if we needed to. So those are the 5 things that I want the community to be at ease, that we're paying attention and we're trying to do whatever the state and federal government tells us to do at the end of the day.
So I'm not making light of this at all when I say this. I just talked to my mother today. She thinks I should stay out of Boston and I should buy food and stockpile it in case society collapses. What I'm hearing tonight is that my mother can relax.
Your mother can relax,
okay.
Most certainly when you read the news reports, they're saying, oh, the sky is falling, you need to have, everyone, Costco ran out of toilet paper this
Right.
weekend. Again, this is no different than any other situation you would have. FEMA has always said you should have at least 72 hours worth of emergency food, water, your prescriptions, etc., to be prepared for we're in New England, a blizzard, tornado, hurricane. In any emergency situation, you should have a little bit of something in your house so that people have time to get to you to assist, so you're not running around, in a catastrophe with nothing. But most certainly, people do not have to go out and hoard anything. Masks are not recommended for the general public. They actually cause more harm. They're saying it's more harm to wear a mask in public. People are not wearing them properly. They're fiddling with the mask, so they're touching their face, they're touching their eyes, they're touching mucous membranes. You don't wear masks if you're in the general public. Masks are meant for people who are sick, to prevent them, from spreading germs to other people when they're entering a place to be evaluated. There's no place for really having N95s out in the general public. Those really should be reserved for people who are taking care of known cases. And it's, people just, I'm not, like I said, I know people are concerned, but again, you can dial back the panic and some of the fear. People are shunning their neighbors because they might look like they came from China.
Right.
There's no need for that. Again, do simple things to protect your own health. Social distancing, stay home if you're sick. Most certainly, many of the businesses that have a lot of international travel with their employees, they have scaled those back dramatically. A lot of businesses who have had people returning from areas where there is community spread are asking their employees to stay home out of an abundance of caution, and work from home. People are just trying to do what's right to protect their, neighbors, and that's all we're asking.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I think you're good.
No, thanks.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming out. All right. Next, we have some resignations. Did you wanna-
1 second, Madam Chair.
Sure. I know, it's, I
Get through
forget
the
what
report.
page. It's a 111 of our packet.
11 of our packet. I'm almost there. There we go. Thank you.
It's still working.
All right, Madam Chair. I
Yes.
move the board vote to accept the resignation of Chet Kubiak as an election worker effective immediately.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Madam Chair.
yes.
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Robert Nault from the Capital Improvement Planning Committee and send him a letter of thanks for his service.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Right, that motion has carried. Next,
Madam Chair.
yes.
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Martina Arndt from the Library Board of Trustees and send a letter of thanks.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now we have appointments.
Madam Chair.
Did they do all-
I move the
Yes.
board vote to appoint Carl Parisi to the Agricultural Commission as an alternate member for a one-year term to expire on June 30th, 2021.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is Carl here? Do we know? Carl's here? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Wait, I'm sorry, did we vote on that?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you, sorry.
Madam Chair. I move the board vote to appoint Jonathan Nickerson to the Conservation Commission for a three-year term to expire on June 30th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Again, is Jonathan here? Oh, great. You want to come on up and introduce yourself? You don't have to, but.
Sure.
All right, come on up.
Podium.
Wherever
Keep going.
you're most comfortable. It
Have a
doesn't
seat.
matter.
Sure.
Have a seat. And if you just want to give us a little information about you, that'd be great.
Sure. My name's Jonathan Nickerson. I live at 32 Hingham Road in North Grafton. I have an interest in the commission and want to be part of the commission because of just the preserving the access to open space and public spaces, including marsh and wetland. I have a background in construction management. I work for a construction company. I'm hoping that could be helpful to the committee itself to see that perspective. But yeah, that's really my focus. I've got a young son that we love getting outside, so wanted to
Great.
help promote that amongst the community as well.
Thank you for stepping forward. That's great.
Sure.
Does anybody have any questions for Jonathan?
What kind of construction?
Commercial construction, mostly institutional, a lot of K through 12 schools, a lot of higher ed.
Great.
Great.
Sigley?
Yes. I might know
Solid
someone named Stock there. I said I might know someone named Stock there
Yeah.
that I work with.
Great. Any other questions for Jonathan? All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. Thanks for stepping forward and volunteering. That's really great.
Of course.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Thanks,
Nice to
Jonathan.
meet
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, new business.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I move the board vote to grant Apple Tree Arts a one-day beer and wine license for Celebrate Everything Irish with Banda Gan. I'm gonna say this right. You said it earlier. What's the last? How do you pronounce the last word there? Banda Gan Ein.
I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't
On
say
March
it.
7th, 2020. I thought you did earlier. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
March 7th, 2020 at 7 p.m. at 1 Grafton Common.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is anyone here from Apple Tree? Usually Liz comes, but I don't think so. That's okay. They have tips on file. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carried. Next one.
Madam Chair, I move the board vote to grant Cara Brindisi a one-day beer and wine license for the evening of music and original storytelling on Thursday, March 12th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. at 1 Grafton Common, also, Apple Tree Arts, Great Hall.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is Kara here tonight? Do you want to come and promote your event real quick?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you for letting me do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm from the area. I'm not from Grafton, but from Worcester, Shrewsbury, and I'm a musician, original songwriter, and I have an event on March 12th. Happens to be my birthday, and that's at Apple Tree Arts. It was recommended to me by a friend who has used the space, and I have not used it and went and visited a week or so ago, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I'm really happy that you all have that space in your town. It's really awesome. So I'm really excited to be performing original music with a lot of great local artists, and the liquor and the wine and beer license is for Agronomy Winery from Oakham, Mass. They'll be there serving their product, their wine, and then Timber Yard Brewery is going to be selling their canned beer, and they're out of East Brookfield. So it'll be a really nice event, and from 6:30 to 8:30 about.
And you can buy tickets at the door.
And you can buy tickets at the door, and Eventbrite has the information. So
That's great.
yeah, so thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? No? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, next one. Tim, did you want to set up the LED lights?
Yeah, Becca can.
Oh,
We
Becca.
have, Dago Electric won the bid. We went through a process with, MAPC, which is a Metropolitan Planning Council outside of Boston, to do the procurement. Saugus and Grafton were the two communities that are using Dago under this procurement. Came in lower than our estimate when we put all the purchasing of equipment and the install and the gateways and so forth together. So the project's under budget. I think it's 58,000 for the install.
59.
59. I don't know if I missed anything.
No, we have I know last week we skipped over this because there was a little bit of a delay with the contract. The contract has been reviewed by town council. It is a standard contract sent out by MAPC. She's comfortable with it. It's been signed by the contractor already. And we are looking to have a pre-construction kickoff meeting this coming Thursday with the hopes of getting them out here to start next week.
Wow.
Great.
Madam Chair, I just
Yes.
have one question. Just to confirm, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, but I can't remember the answer. So this isn't the maintenance contract, this is just for
Just
install? Okay. Do we
But
have a
incidentally,
maintenance?
it is the same person,
tank-
one.
Oh, okay.
We do have a maintenance contract with Dago as
Okay,
well.
okay.
So it's the same company.
Okay.
And we had to have that in place before we could get the lights purchased from National Grid. So we had to have that first, and then we bought the lights, and now we did the procurement for the installer, and it's the same group.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think it's 714 lights they're doing total.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's the
Big job.
timeline on the work being done?
We have to be done by April 15th,
Yeah.
It'll be
Wow.
quick. Yeah,
It's like 4 weeks.
so they start next week and
great.
get installed.
Anybody,
Save money on electricity.
Yep.
any other questions? Okay, I'll take a
Madam
motion.
Chair, I move the
Yes.
board vote to allow the chair to sign the contract with Dago Electric for the installation services for the LED streetlight conversion project in the amount of $59,261.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, motion has carried. So next, we have the chapter 90 funds for VHB.
So last week did they make application last week for chapter 90 funds to be used? And now we're updating the contract, or is this the,
No, this would be for the Chapter 90 application itself.
all right, so we didn't do that at the last meeting.
I don't believe so.
All right, so when we went through this process of all of the takings that need to happen along Main Street for this TIP project, the appraiser that we chose, Greg Story, said, hey, it might be a good idea for the people who have to see their land on a map to have it colored, so they can see what the temporary and permanent easements are and what the dimensions are. So that layer of detail is an $8,500 cost, which we want to ask Chapter 90 to reimburse us for. And if they do agree to that, we'll do a contract with VHB to modify their contract for that project to provide those layers, to give those homeowners, definitive layout of what the area of taking would be. Having said that, there's already, I'm gonna guess at a number, 30 out of the 133 temporary or permanent easements that are required. They've already signed off, giving us access to the land, so that's really good, but they can change their minds under the rules at any time, so we may have to compensate them anyways. So that's why we're going through the appraisal process, but we do wanna make it easier for them to understand, and I thought it was a good idea, and while it is 8,500, we want to keep that goodwill and support with the community along Main Street for the project. So that's what the ask is for.
I have a question, Madam Chair. Tim, are they gonna be updating the GIS application and adding that layer into that application for people to see, or would this just be,
It'd be one-off, so if it was your property, we'd be able to show you on the map.
Okay.
And when we go out to bid, it would be part of the bid documents, but it won't be in our GIS layer, because there would be no need to show utility easement. And we usually keep that proprietary anyways for safety purposes.
right, isn't it our easement though, that we're asking?
Some are for aerial trespass for power lines, so no, they are not ours. Some are, but mostly they're for utilities.
Okay,
But the utilities won't do it, so we have to do that legwork under the federal guidelines.
okay,
They should have done it when they put the poles in, but they never did. And now some were never done and they're not moving, and I still need easements for those. And then there are aerial trespass where I need easements for when they move the pole or the guide wire.
okay. Thank you. Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move the board vote to approve the Chapter 90 fund application in the amount of $8,500 for work to be performed by VHB as part of the Main Street project.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Select board reports. Are there any members of the board that have a report?
I've got a GSC update. The Grafton Sustainability Commission met last Wednesday and went over the first half of the first draft of the benchmarking report. We've got some revisions to make on that, and a review of the hopefully complete benchmarking report coming up a week from Thursday.
Anybody else have any reports? I just have a couple of things. I did go into Boston last week because I am our appointed member to the MBTA Advisory Board. So I do go to those meetings quarterly. There is going to be a lot of work that's going to happen to the commuter line and not really a lot to the commuter, but to the T. So you know that you can go on their website and get all that information. But I will more information to follow. Coalition for Healthy Grafton still meets. They are Wednesdays at 2:15 at the high school. Wednesdays once a month. The next one is Wednesday. I believe is March 25th. So if anybody's ever interested in coming, it's a great group. And also tomorrow we are at the senior center at 10:30 for our coffee hour. So just a reminder for the board that we're doing coffee hour tomorrow. I have a fruit salad and danishes and muffins and stuff, so I will be bringing that. And that's it for me. TA report.
Thank you. I'll be brief as I can be. I'm not sure if it was in your announcements, and I don't think it was, but the Super Park meeting tomorrow at Apple Tree Arts, 7 p.m. Part of the visioning process to develop the design and to coordinate a dollar figure around the park, and they asked for CPA funds. I think it's important to note that CPA funds and the existing article that was approved probably 3 years ago now from Overlay Reserve will be used for this visioning process and then for seed money for the project overall. I think it's important to note that we're trying to get the best bang for the buck relative to the synergy of the library project being built and when construction is ongoing. If there are any opportunities to not duplicate efforts to put infrastructure in, is to try to do that at the same time. So that's kind of the goal. I don't read a lot of comments online, but I get feedback in my office constantly about what people might say. So I just thought it was important for people to note two things. One, CPA money is only for open space, recreation, conservation, and affordable housing. CPA funds are what we're looking for to do Super Park, so I think that was an important point. And the other is the timing of it as such relative to the library project is we don't want to lay a new parking lot down and then have to dig it up in 8 months after it's done just to put a utility line. And if that's what we decide to do for Super Park, but we have to get through the visioning process first. So I figured I would lay those two pieces out and remind people that we want people to come in and hear about the survey results at 7 o'clock at Apple Tree Arts tomorrow. So we hope everybody can make it, and I think that will be taped so people can rewatch it if they can't make it. One quick update on the SAFER grant. I think you had a meeting and Ray came in last week. The grant round opens March 19th for submissions. They're due May 1st when the grant application closes. The announcements, they say, are between 30 and 45 days following submittal, but we all know that those times seem to get a little stretched, but we're looking at, June 15th is a realistic date to know whether we've been awarded that SAFER grant. I know there was some discussion last week relative to a memo from Finance Committee on committing to not hiring someone. I know that the board will probably not ratify an appointment that I make to you without an appropriation, and I know that the accountant will not ratify that there's certification of funds available to pay a person. So I think they're right to be concerned, but there's at least two fail-safes there that I will not be hiring someone if I do not have that grant in hand, or if we find another means or method to pay for it. So I want to address that. The Main Street TIP project, the appraisal has begun. We talked about that a couple minutes ago, but I'm satisfied with the timelines relative to the start for fiscal '21 for the bidding process and awarding the contract and start construction. Many of you heard about the grand jury subpoena relative to the documents regarding host community agreements for marijuana establishments. So a lot of our neighboring communities were asked to provide these documents through a subpoena. We got that same thing on late February. We got the notice to provide documents by the 16th. So, yeah, so late February. So we'll do that. We'll obviously comply with that. So they want us to turn over any written correspondence, emails. So we'll obviously comply with that request. We obviously are seeking advice from Ginny on every step along the way just to make sure we get it right and give them everything that they want. We continue on contract negotiations with the GMEA bargaining unit. We continue that on Thursday. The cable franchise agreement with Charter is ongoing still. We have a meeting, I think, on the 12th of March for that. And tomorrow afternoon, we're going to have a conference call with the three chairs of School Committee, Board of Selectmen, and Finance Committee, Select Board, Finance Committee, to talk through the Thursday meeting. Friday, we will have a discussion with stakeholders, and I define stakeholders as chairmen of ZBA, Economic Development Commission, Board of Selectmen, and Planning, relative to the reuse of the DPW site. We did a phase 2 on it. There were some hydrocarbons found in the soil and in the water, reportable conditions just above the level. Same conditions exist across the street at the library, incidentally, so we don't really know what's the cause. But the reason why I'm telling you is that, hey, I want you to know that there's a reportable piece there, and moving forward, we're trying to determine whether it's in our best interest to try to clean it and then sell it, because remember the whole outreach and visioning process was to get that to be on the tax rolls again, that whole parcel. So we're trying to figure out, do we do the disclosure, sell it as is, or try to mitigate it or remediate it and then sell it? We're trying to figure out what those costs are. Yes.
Tim, so you're meeting with the chairs of the ZBA, the Planning, Select Board, and Conservation?
No, EDC.
EDC, okay. And are those chairs deciding something on Friday?
No, we're just I'm trying to take the temperature of what they work with their boards every day. They know what the community might be supportive of, to see what an overall structure might look like on that parcel. Is it 3 stories? Is it 4 stories? So we have to change the zone to get it to be the highest and best use. I want to know what their opinions are of that.
And will those opinions be able to be made back here for our comments?
Yeah, ultimately, if we do a zone change, you'll
Or any,
Be part and
any
parcel.
comments at that matter? I mean, I don't know about the zone change, but, even if someone says do nothing, I mean, is that something that,
well, you don't want to hear nothing, right?
I'm not assuming anything, Tim. All I'm saying
Yeah.
is that if, regardless of what the statements are,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I'm involving the chair of your board, and either her or I will
Okay.
tell you what the outcome was.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
We should have that on a discussion item, so to assume what, how are we going about determining what the highest and best use is?
Well, we did the outreach, we did the study, we have the consultant, Horse and Whitney Group, we did a charrette, if you will.
Yeah.
So the mixed use component is probably in terms of survey data and the highest and best use, that's what people are coming back to us with.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, not to get the whole thing about it, it's just, there's a cost associated with the cleanup, right? So if we're not interested in bearing that cost, that's probably going to limit what a developer may or may not wanna do. What you don't wanna do is not bear the cost, have the land sit there forever and then miss an opportunity and then come back and say, okay, later on, we'll bear the cost of cleaning up. I would just like to have that discussion at some point.
Yeah, and I think when we get through this, we'll have Horst and Whitney come in to the board and have a discussion about the highest and best use and what the impediments to that would be.
Yep.
But I'm just trying to clear the way with at least some of the leadership groups in town to see what their appetite would be and give us some guidance.
Sure.
So that's the purpose of the call.
That makes sense.
And we have a lot of interest and a lot of tours planned for 8 Pine Street, middle of March. Those bids come back. They've done at least 3 tours with 3 different groups over the past week. So a lot of interest in 8 Pine. We had a development team meeting last week, and there's a marijuana testing company that's looking to locate in Grafton, so we're working hard to find them a space. They have other business interests too, so we're trying to really push them towards Route 30 and the 33 acres that's owned by Mass Development, so we're joining those folks together. We have continued discussions with Wyman Gordon on the land deal. I have no details on the proposal. Chris and I, the new planner, are going out on Thursday to meet with Ronnie Brooks to talk about a subsection of the 29 acres that's for sale now out to market, but there's another 12 acres to the right that we're going to talk about what its highest and best use might be and what we think the community might support relative to that. And then finally, the treasurer collector's office, we do collect, 99% of taxes that are owed, but there are some parcels of land that, if the owner's unknown or, it went into foreclosure and they didn't pay taxes and now they're in tax title, we identify pieces that might have the best yield to get back on the tax roll. So right now we're looking at 2, one's on Depot Street. There's some impediments there relative to water and sewer because there are none there and the parcel's very small and close to the river. So that's gonna be tough, but that's one that we're looking at to see if we can get it back on the tax rolls. The other is 18 Westboro Road. There's 31 acres tucked back there it's ours. We own it. We took it through a tax title process, and we're trying to figure out the highest and best use, but not see a 40B get slammed on the backside of that property. So we're trying to just make you aware that there's 2 parcels we're trying to get back on the rolls, and those are the 2. And we're working with D. Ambrosia, which is Peter Brown, who's our tax title attorney, and the treasurer collector's office on the best path forward for both of those parcels to get them back up and running. And that concludes my report.
Yes.
Can you just tell me what the second parcel is again?
18 Old Westboro Road.
It's kind of next to the school.
It has frontage in 2 spots, which,
It's close to the school.
yeah, it actually abuts the back of
Yeah.
the North Street Elementary School.
Right.
Okay.
Great. Okay, is there any correspondence, Peter? Yes.
Yeah, there is. Thank you. Respect to from Mr. and Mrs. Lohan on Estabrook Road. I have this here for Donna to put into our next meeting. But there's a few correspondences that came through. One from Ronald Gardner sent an email stating opposition to the override. He feels money should not be spent on library and super park. Another correspondence came in from Tara Booley, who sent an email concerning the tax bills and the information provided for paying bills online. She identified some areas where the process could be improved. I think, Becca, I appreciate you getting back to her. I think you replied to her, correct?
Someone did.
Yeah, I think it was me thanking her,
Oh,
like you
I'm
said,
sorry.
and I sent it on to,
Yep.
and we're just gonna put a
We
pay
talked
button,
to
because I hate the
Amy.
landing pages, people, you have to go to one page to get to where you thought you were gonna go. It happens with the agendas too.
I think we appreciate it. It just, the responsiveness was great. Thank you for that. And then, one from Colleen Roy submitted an email suggesting an online survey be developed for an override as a way to solicit, public input on it. Those are really it, at this point. Does anyone have anything, any specific you want me to do beyond that?
No.
Done? Okay, thank you.
All right, we're on to discussion. Budget fiscal year 21.
So we get a memo on Friday or Thursday from the assessor's office with good news for us. In terms of new growth and how that gets certified and the timing of it, we have until June 30 to collect all those building permits and all that new growth. So they're estimating the 550 we were carrying to be upgraded to 650. So not that changes in terms of what we're going to spend, but really the variant is, the marijuana tax money and pilot money and whether we use that all in the analysis for going forward in terms of revenue if we take out the grant, and I think this was part and parcel of what, the finance committee recommended to the board, reduce that grant amount, which is 130. We can take that, we've taken that out of the scenario now already, and just in anticipation of, so it's really a net neutral, but if you wanna take off more, I gotta find other places to reduce or increase revenue. And we have been talking to Jay and to Dan about how we might offset that if an override were to pass or were to fail. We're gonna have to do the latter if it were to fail. So there'd be 300,000 if we didn't get from marijuana that we would have to make up someplace. So we're confident between the two groups that we can organizationally manage the 300,000 somehow, some way. But I guess I need direction from the board. Does it want me to carry that 360 or some portion thereof? I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think we have 3 host agreements out there. They're all moving forward with both with CCC and one certainly in the process with Resonate through planning. So I don't think we're not going to get any of it. It's tough to phrase that answer, but we're certainly going to get some of the 360, if not all of it.
I would prefer to be a little more conservative about the 360, and in so doing, ideally would like to direct that to a capital stabilization account for a couple of different reasons. First, I think that even taking Peter DeCaro's outfit, he was before planning board, and planning board had him go back and talk to a few more groups, the police department, the fire department, about the site issues. And that's going to delay them about 6 weeks. So then they're into the spring. They've got a provisional license. They still have to go back and get their final license. So there could be I don't know how much delay between, getting that approval here, going from a provisional license to a final license. Could be 4 months, could be 6 months. If you're going that far out for those guys, you're not seeing any money from those guys until December-ish, whenever they open their doors. The other two, I don't know what's going on with them. So I think anything that we get out of that in FY21 is gravy. And I would prefer to, and because there's sort of a time limit on it, for the next 5 years, if we could take that money and start turning that into capital, that makes the most sense to me. And if there's pain to be felt, then we feel it now and use that for all the more reason to go back to people and say, listen, we were hoping for an additional $300,000 in marijuana revenue. We did everything we could to facilitate this. The CCC is slow, the process is slow, and here's the number that we need in order to carry the services that Grafton residents expect, and we're going to bake this into the override. That would be my preference.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, along with what Ed said, Tim, what would be your recommendations to reduce the budget further to make up that 360?
Well, I think it'd be a combination of reductions and increase in fees. Bag fees would be the thing I would go to. People I talked to, even as late as today at Bushel and Peck, just the slide we put with discussing bad ideas of reductions, trash is not a thing that people want to lose. At least that's today's conversation. I've had that conversation 100 times, but that was the most recent one. So increasing bag fees would be one. We'd want to change to a flex component for the bags to get a little bit more volume to it. They are designed to fail. I know I say that all the time. So if you are putting 60 pounds in a 25-pound bag, it's going to break. But I did float the idea by my staff today of letting the board members take those bags home just to test them, a little aside from our discussion, but take the roll and see how it works, make sure the strings work. But we do have a couple in stock in terms of the flex type bags that, I don't know, Glad started them, and this company was able to get the technology to make them. So that would be one.
Okay.
And then I know that the school, and they're figuring out their pieces, and we've met with them, and you have the tri-board meeting Thursday. There's more from the school in terms of movement, even on athletic fees and other fees. So we can make it up between the two.
Anybody else? Don?
Just curious what an estimate gain would be from the increased fee on trash bags.
Well, if we doubled it, we would have 800,000 and pretty much almost cover the whole transportation and the disposal. But that's $20 a roll. I don't think anybody really wants to do that. So we're thinking of maybe 50% increase in it and collecting another 200,000.
You know, at the last meeting, I think, you know, I was pretty clear. You know, my concern about carrying that 360 and obviously that 130. I know you said you removed the 130 from the Safer Grant. I would like to see what cuts on the municipal side that you would have to do to make up for that full-time position, just so we can assure that we've got some adequate, or at least the start of some adequate leadership in the for a full-time position in the fire department for public safety. You know, if you say increasing bag fees would net us, you know, 50%, so that would make up about another $200,000. So you'd roughly cover that position right there, and you'd have some money left over. You know, what's your estimation at that point, or what's your thoughts on how you plan to make up the rest of the cannabis money that may or may not come in? I mean, to the point earlier, you said you're going to carry a modest amount, a conservative amount. I mean, I don't know, or are you going to take it out altogether? I think I was pretty clear I wanted to take it out, but what's your plan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to know, do you want me to take it out or not? I mean, we have a $63 million budget. We estimate what things will cost. We go out to bid. We beat people up. We get things lower than what we're estimating the budget to be. Inside the $60 million budget, we can manage day to day, just good operational management. We can manage the 300,000. So I would never put a number forward if I didn't think I could meet it.
Right.
Not to be crass or whatever. I mean, I want to meet. It makes it easier if we just want to put in the override. It's fine if I make it. You don't have to levy it. And you save the people money.
But, and I thought that was a good strategy to go on. You know, to that point earlier, I'm sorry, Donna, just 1 minute, I'm not done with this topic. But, you know, if we do get an override, you know, and the money does come in, maybe we don't raise the levy limit. Maybe that's the policy that this board needs to make for the general public's good, right? So, I mean, that's something that we would set on our end. But it would be great to see, you know, that removed, and then what are the areas that you, in other words, I would like to know what adjustments that you would have to make conservatively within the budget to make that up, the 360. I'd just like to know that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would propose bag fee increases first.
So that's 200,000. So that's 160 left.
When Tom just read the audit, there's 700,000 out of the $60 million budget, and operations is less than 0.5%. We're close as it is, but we can manage the 300,000 inside the budget. I can't tell you specifically. There'll be $100 from the police department. There'll be 2,000 from the fire department. It'll come from all different places, but I can't give you an exact. I'm going to give you a number in May. July's going to start. It's going to be that number at the end of June 30.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. It's impossible to do that. It never works that way.
And I'm sorry, go ahead, Donna, you go first.
I agree with that. I mean, I think it never comes out exactly to the penny on any given time between revenue and expenditures. So I feel that you've got the ability to manage that, and we have the opportunity in October, if I'm not mistaken, to make a recommendation then when we're doing budget discussion at town meeting. I also, you know, I guess the question is to the school department too. What are they doing to help us meet that need? I mean, we're trying to present a balanced budget, and I know they've made adjustments and we've made adjustments. We've talked about some fees. They've talked about some fees. There's a never-ending cycle here, and I just think, you know, I don't want to see more cuts on the town side unless we have, until we at least meet with the TRICOM meeting on Thursday night, when we hear what else is being discussed or offered or proposed.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough doing it kind of in a vacuum relative to the discussion. So you charged Becca last week to come up with a plan and recommendation. Jay and I formulated that today. We're meeting tomorrow with at least the 3 chairs, and then the full meeting Thursday night relative to the 3 groups, where we can talk about all those particular options.
And you want to go? Okay.
I have one more question. I just want to understand the Safer Grant position. If you've already reduced out of the budget the 130,000 you said, so my understanding from discussion from a few weeks ago is if that line item is taken out completely, we can't hire somebody. So is the line item still there to hire a police
The
chief?
revenue for the new growth will be the money.
Will
that
be
we
the
use
money.
to hire the
Okay,
person.
I just wanted to confirm that. So that line item is still in. It's just
The
Yeah.
position is in the
the
budget.
position, that's what I
Yes.
mean. The position
Now,
is in
instead
the
of having a
budget with
grant
the
to pay for it.
additional 100,000.
The revenue line from the
Yes.
grant is now gone
Got it,
from the budget.
got it.
So now you're using levy
Yep,
to
okay,
pay for the position.
thank you.
My opinion, I'm very comfortable with the 360. This is what, our 12th budget. We've always been conservative. We've always met our revenue goals. We've always managed it over the years. Resonate is going forward. They are in planning. It is true, we don't know when they're going to get their license, but they already have a license. So, they've been through the process. The chances of them getting their license sooner rather than later, I feel like is really good. We had reached out to our other marijuana businesses, and they both feel like they'll have provisional licenses within 90
Yeah,
days.
MJ Market responded, Resonate. Nobleman, I haven't seen a note back yet, but I expect that he'll send me something.
And Nature's Remedy with the cultivation
Yes.
facility.
And they have
So-
they're already up and operational in Millbury and other places, so.
Right,
But that won't be retail sales, so just
that's a cultivation
cultivation,
facility.
correct.
But there's still
Yeah, they
tax
could-
revenue
yeah.
there.
I think they might be a longer lead time in terms of building than the other two, but the other two could drive him to build quicker to have product closer.
Right. So, I understand the concerns, but again, it's $300,000 and it's a $68 million budget, right? Not 63.
Yeah, as of right now,
It's a 60.
it grows.
But, I would like to see it stay in. If, we have to raise bag fees, I'd rather, do that in October if, the revenue isn't coming in the way we had hoped. So why raise them now? Because everything is an estimation. As we know, the economy can tank tomorrow, and then we don't get our excise tax doesn't come in, or the building permits don't come in, and our revenue is gonna be hard. You just don't know. Everything is,
Well, I think that's why you have people in place, whether it's the school department to manage the organization day to day with class size and the number of teachers in each class, or, in 2010, when there were 9 C cuts, we had a spending freeze. No one could do anything. We paid salaries, we kept the lights on, we didn't do anything else. And that's how we managed not to, if I didn't collect all the money, it was okay, because I didn't spend all the money that was appropriated.
okay.
My staff love spending freezes.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, just briefly on that. Again, here we are. Philosophically, the difference between sort of budgeting for what we hope to see and budgeting for what we're likely to see. And sure, the world could end tomorrow, Jen, but it's not likely to. The economy could tank tomorrow, but it's not likely to. We're talking about here about what money we're likely to have. And there is a difference between a provisional license and a final license. And Resonate doesn't have a license in Grafton. Peter Caro's got a license. I misspoke earlier. He's got a provisional license for his other facilities, not the one in Grafton. It's a long process that they go through, and we're looking to budget for money that we're hoping to get in over the course of the coming year, starting in July. So what we want to be able to do over the course of the next couple of months is convince the public that we have an understanding of what revenue is coming in, what revenue is going out, and to present them with something as accurate as we possibly can, so that then we can go out and make the argument, okay, you can trust us with this. We are ready to make hard decisions here. And over the course of the next 5 years, 10 years, or whatever it is, for whatever override money we're asking for, you can then trust that we're going to budget appropriately, we're going to project appropriately. It's not going to be based on hopes and dreams, but actual revenues coming in. And when we get those revenues coming in, if they're revenues that are only going to last a period of a few years, we're gonna do what is appropriate with those and spend that not on ongoing capital needs perhaps, but on something, a little more long-term in terms of capital. I would hope in terms of capital or stabilization. And that could be a fund for stabilization. That could be a fund for OPEB. You know, there are myriad of other uses for that particular money that would be more appropriate than just hoping we get it next year, keeping in this operating budget, and then hoping to work it out as we go. That's just not the angle I'm looking for.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not,
Okay.
it's, you're not, the work of our town staff is not based on hopes and dreams, Ed. You're,
Okay, that's not quite what I'm saying either. I'm saying that if we are less than certain that this money is going to be there for us, I don't think it should be in the budget.
but our town staff is confident that that money will be there.
Yes, I'm just calling that into question based on life experience and what we're seeing in the market.
Okay, I disagree.
Okay.
Doreen, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, two things. So one, I'm very interested in continuing this discussion on Thursday with the TRICOM committee and getting more feedback from FinCom and the school committee and weighing in on reductions. I see both sides right now, I have to be honest, and I have a concern about raising bag fees 50% and then us receiving the revenue, and we've gone and asked the townspeople to pay that much more. So I want to have more of a discussion and more time to think about it.
You still get to control that though, right? 'Cause
Yes.
You won't ask them to raise and appropriate at October or in May town meeting.
Right,
So if you got it in the
right.
bags, you wouldn't have to raise it in taxes.
Okay,
So you still have a lot of control over it.
yeah.
But I think Thursday might be more clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
And one thought to pin in our heads for the next two topics from now is bag fees, of course, are regressive. They hurt the user, of course, you know, sure, it's a user fee, but everybody produces waste and trash, and it hurts the people that have flat fee to spend, or a level money to spend every year.
Could
Yeah.
say the same thing about any fees that we raise.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, permit fees. I mean,
Sure.
there's another one. Athletic fees. I mean, we're all talking about, to Donna's point, you know, trying to find areas where we can generate revenue to help offset. But I think every fee that we look at impacts our community.
Yeah.
In some aspect. So.
I know, I was just giving you sort of a spoiler alert for discussion item number C, which is
I
a
didn't-
progressive way to raise money, but anyway, we'll get there.
Any further discussion for budget fiscal year 21? Right, town meeting?
So we're gonna start to put together the warrant. We have our stock standard articles, but one issue we might wanna grapple with, maybe there's others too, but the one I can think of most is the percentage that we tied for retail sales for marijuana establishments. We tied it to the liquor licenses. The percentage doesn't work exactly to the state's math. So we have 3 viable host agreements. We did send letters to the 4 for retail. One responded that I didn't solicit it from him, but in the email he told me basically the site wasn't gonna work. And then I said, well, let's null and void the agreement you have with the town, so we can really only have 3 on the books, and then he stopped responding. So I'm on record with him, and he's on record with me saying, the site is not gonna work. He doesn't even have a location because Nature's Remedy owns the site. So in my mind, it's moot. So we have Resonate, Noble Manor, MJ Market, Manor, I'm sorry. So we have really 2 licenses to give under the bylaw. Do we want to expand that to 3, since we have 3 that seem to be progressing along the road? So it's nothing you have to answer now. It's just, I just want to get some ideas out there for any town meeting warrant articles that we want to consider. But that was one that came to mind as a substantive example that we should coalesce around one way or the other.
Okay. Peter?
Is there any other articles you think that we may want to consider?
That's the only one that came to mind to give a substantive example.
Okay, thank you.
Did we have this? We talked about this recently.
We had a phone call conversation about it. I don't know what.
No, I mean, in here, we were talking about, because I think I was confused about whether or not restaurant liquor licenses.
Just
were-
package stores.
Just package stores.
Yeah, that's what the percentage is based on.
Okay, so the way I was reading it was we were sort of, based on the package store equation, it was what, 1.5 and we rounded up to
0.7,
2?
something like
Okay.
that.
So how would we get to 3?
You would change the percentage in the bylaw.
In the bylaw, okay, so
Yeah.
it's just a bylaw change?
Yeah.
Okay, that,
So that would be the town meeting warrant
Gotcha,
article that we
gotcha.
would propose, if we would so inclined.
okay. I'd be happy to do it. I mean, I'm sort of an economic libertarian when it comes to people wanting to open up a business. You want to open up a business, open up a business. And if it's going to bring in revenue, even better for us. I'm not sure how much longer these things are going to bring in revenue for municipalities, depending on what the state does with the host community agreements, but it's fine with me.
Well, we have to remember that the pilot's one piece of these agreements of 42,000, give or take.
Yeah.
Annually, the rest is the tax. The tax is forever.
Right.
So we're always gonna have that ability to have the tax. So that's good. Well, that could change, I guess, but
Right.
right now it's not,
Right.
it's not in the law. So just think about things that you think we should bring before town meeting, so when we create a warrant article, we'll capture all those things.
I think just to maybe keep the conversation going, Tim, if that's the recommendation, could you come up with some draft language ahead of time and maybe float it by one of the future agenda items just to kind of show us what that would look like?
To update the license?
No,
Oh.
to increase the amount to be 3.
Oh, yeah. It's a matter of changing the percentage that's allowed. It's like, it's a very small change,
Okay,
but substantive.
okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, I can do that.
Right, resolution for local option income tax.
Okay, this is something I started my career in Ohio. In Ohio, I had a local option income tax of 2.5%, mostly funded school and municipal operations. So I looked at this as a way, when we started talking about overrides, and when we have a lot of seniors that come into this building, there's a lot of people that pay taxes that come and see me and lament that cost. When we had this discussion, it shouldn't be a surprise relative to the goal retreat we had back in August, to look at ways of diversifying our approach to local taxes and ways to fund things other than property taxes, i.e. fees. So a local option income tax, when we did the math, based on, the Midwestern style, I try to compare it to what $1 million of an override of a levy would cost the average taxpayer and what an income tax of 0.1% would cost. So what I have is a resolution. It's just for discussion purposes only. There's no action to be taken on this unless you deem it so in the future. I thought in the form of a resolution it would be more substantive to get notice by the Mass Municipal Association. The state of Massachusetts may or may not have ever seen something like this before, but I'm gonna swing for the fences and see if I can make this work. So Grafton itself files $935 million in income tax with the state of Massachusetts. So about $40 million is raised from that 5% withholdings. It's a lot more than that, but obviously people get returns from the state. But we give them 40 million, they give us about 12 on the cherry sheet for local aid and for Chapter 70. So 0.01% of the 953 million, if you were to hold that amount back, that's 935,000, which for the average wage earner in Grafton, let's say it's 75,000 bucks. It's $75 for that wage earner for that 0.1. If you do $1 million of property taxes of levy, the average homeowner, which there are, whether we want to believe it or not, there are, 35% of our population, 65 or older, on fixed incomes, not all of them, in their homes for long term, that lament to me quite often that they can't afford the taxes. Comparatively speaking, we're right in the middle of the pack with every other community, so it might be true for them, but on the whole, we're competitive with the market. But they would have to pay $151 for every $1 million levied. So when I take the math backwards based on $75,000 worth of average earnings for one individual paying $75 versus $150, I say I just saved someone $150. People may not see it that way, but I give you, 6 paragraphs that kind of lay out the logic, hopefully concise enough where people can understand that it's more progressive to use an income tax approach versus a property tax approach to pay for goods and services. The people who are wage earners in this community now have kids in school, That's where our drivers are. They're getting $1.5 million new dollars next year. That's limited and constrained by Proposition 2.5. If we want to fix that, long-term, not going to happen overnight, we have to think about ways to diversify that income stream. And this is one tool in which to do it. So that's the math, that's the logic behind it. And
So,
if the board was inclined in the future to take this apart, ask questions, you know, the state rep tells me we could move forward with a home rule petition to get it to the legislature. I imagine it would take a ballot initiative locally and obviously town meeting to appropriate the funds. So that's the long and short of it.
so over the long, or because this is a new revenue coming in, do you envision that over time, if this was adopted by the voters in Grafton, that our property taxes would then be able to decrease instead of continuing to increase, like
I
the
think be
communities
able is
that?
the key word, but there would have to be some mechanism. You know, I just don't know how to write it to say, you know, protect the people who are over a certain age and in an income bracket and keep their property taxes where they are.
Right.
I don't have the ability to do the analysis of who those people are and how much they would not pay, therefore we wouldn't get their revenue, and this would offset that. That's the math equation I haven't done.
Right, but when we, when we set the tax rate every year, if we have if we have a different revenue source besides property tax,
You would use less of the levy.
we would use less of the levy.
Yes. So even, for example, here, if you needed to raise 1 million for next fiscal and this was in place, you would go to income tax versus property tax, saving the taxpayer the 150 for that extra $1 million.
So I think that's my question, would be the interplay between Proposition 2.5 and the income tax. You, obviously, a majority of our incomes, a vast majority would still be coming from, the property taxes plus new growth. You would have this to sort of supplement that and then slow the rate of growth of that structural deficit, right? So instead of doing an override every 4, 5, 6 years, it may be 10, 12, 13, something like that, with something like this in there. I think it's a great idea, Tim. You know, I think that, or I know that 13 states do this, right? And it's mostly Midwestern states, former manufacturing states, so-called Rust Belt states. But 43 states in the union have some sort of supplement to local property taxes. And New England actually is an outlier in that we don't do more of this sort of thing. And we're not immune to the effects of the market, certainly, and it's getting harder and harder and harder for us to pay for services within the confines of something that was set up in 1980. So I think it's a fantastic idea. You know, I think whatever help that you need from this board, we should give you. Certainly, we're gonna have to reach out to MMA. I'm curious as to, this can't be the first time they've heard of this over the course of the past 15 years. So I wonder what their experience with this sort of thing has been.
There isn't any. I had the legislative affairs director in my office 2 months ago, and they were like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Wow, that's surprising.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
It's strange.
Wow.
I would think.
So, I mean, as we discussed a little bit earlier, this is like transformative, trailblazing kind of thing, but I think there's a lot of other communities that would consider this type of option, given that there are a number of communities the same size as Grafton or smaller, and that are in the same situation that we are. We do not have the ability to generate new revenue, and taxes keep going up. So, I don't know. I would support this. I think home rule petitions, it's, you know.
It's cheaper. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's guarding against the people who truly don't have the ability to pay.
Right, those
People
with
who
low
do,
incomes,
you
yeah.
put the onus on me, Peter, Ed, the people who have kids in school. Or need services. You protect the rest. It's just an option, and I don't know whether it'd be received better by, certainly in the context of value for folks relative to an override or income tax, it's more palatable. I think the communities has to trust the fact that you're not gonna go to the levy limit every
just it.
time. So if
That's just
if
it.
we have the 5-year plan, this is the growth pattern, we're gonna stay at 5%, 2%, 6%, whatever the number is, and this meets that need, then you never ask that question again.
And I think that the conversation becomes, again, philosophical and political about, okay, well, this is just an end around Proposition 2.5. Well, yes, it is. And, you know, we would have to own that. We would have to own the fact that Proposition 2.5 just isn't getting us to the place that we could even feasibly go anymore without repetitive cyclical overrides. So the question isn't, do you live within your means or not? The question is, do you want higher regressive forms of taxation, or do you want higher progressive forms of taxation? Do you want it to be fair, or do you want it to be unfair? Because this idea that you're going to get blood from a stone and continue to starve the beast that is local government and somehow make ends meet by not buying more pens and more paper, it's just a fiction. It's not going to work this way anymore, particularly in the era of increased state mandates and increased healthcare costs that luckily aren't so high this year.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I mean, I don't have children in the schools any longer, but I mean, this would apply to me, and I, want it for the
Yeah.
good of the town and the good of the school
Yeah.
district, and everything else that we may be able to mitigate. As I said, I don't think it's going to solve everything, but I think it just, we're one of those communities. It's been articulated here before that falls into that Chapter 70 kind of not being a proactive kind of opportunity for us. We're one of the ones that's getting screwed by this whole new formula. So we've got to look at it. I think, see what else we can find out.
Yeah, let's push it forward and see, again, maybe.
Well, if you
we'll listen-
resolve to do it, then I think that's the first.
So
step
what's
to
our
get
next
the
step? We
attention.
have to actually have a real
Yeah, you would-
something
you
to
would-
sign.
You would read it, you would sign it, and you would resolve to make the request as it's written to the State House.
So can everybody look at it carefully, over the week or so and see if there's any,
It's a 5-year thing. I mean, we're not doing this tomorrow, but this is 5 years. You want to talk about, so maybe the income level's $1.5 billion by then.
yeah, but you have to start. We have to start.
That's right.
Right.
Okay. So we'll see it
That's
on
all I
another agenda. Okay.
Good.
Sounds good. Meeting minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I motion that the select board approve the meeting minutes dated February 4th, 2020, as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.